Hello, my name is Julie Grimm. I am here with another episode of Love, Dating, and Relationships for Spiritual Women. For those of you who haven't watched, who don't know me, I'm a spiritual guide and energy healer in the lineage of King Solomon, and I support individuals on walking their path towards greater self-awareness and greater enlightenment in their life. And I am so thrilled to have Susan Trotter here with me today. Susan is a relationship coach, and I love what she does because she helps us find fun in dating again. And I'm all about play and fun. So she helps people date successfully and also bring that joy and fun back in. So Susan, so glad to have you.
Thank you, Julie. I'm really happy to be here.
Wonderful. So let's dive right in. I mean, my first question for you is, what are the major struggles or obstacles that you see your clients come forward with? And then, because I love fun and because you specialize in that, where did the fun go? Why did we lose it? Right. What happened?
Good question. So let's start with the first one. What are people struggling with? And what's creating that struggle? So I think that so much of what happens in our experience with dating relationships has to do with ourselves, first and foremost. And so when people are dating and they're not feeling confident, or they're not feeling good about themselves, or they maybe haven't done some of the work they need to do to identify patterns and make shifts and so forth, they bring that into their experience. And so, if you're, what we put out in the world, right, tends to be what we get back. And there's so many different structures for thinking about that. But at its basic level, what we put out is what we get back. So when we're feeling good about ourselves, we're much more likely to attract people who feel good about themselves and are going to make us feel good. And of course, the reverse is true as well. So I think that the first step is really looking at where people are in their lives and how are they feeling about themselves. And again, have they done the work they need to do to identify patterns that don't serve them very well? History tends to repeat itself when we don't work through things. It's true in life in general, and it's certainly true when it comes to dating and relationships. And then the other piece, I think, is that people don't necessarily know how to assess people really well online, and don't take the time before they move forward in meeting them to really do their due diligence and assess them up front. And I think that part's really important, because when we move too quickly and we meet people and we get disappointed, then we bring that back into the process, and then we're feeling more negative about it. So that's part of the struggle as well.
So many things that you just shared there. First one, when you were talking about, seeing that mirror, what came to mind was, if we don't like what we see in the mirror, we don't go buy a different mirror.
Right.
Like, that's not going to change it. We have to clean up whatever, we're bringing to that table. And then what you were saying about relationships and, it's like, I've seen for myself too, that sometimes I'll search for a partner because I feel dissatisfied with my life. So it's like, I'm looking outside myself to find that satisfaction. And again, it's like, well, if the mirror that I'm bringing is dissatisfaction, I'm probably not going to find fulfillment and contentment there on the other side of things.
Absolutely. I often say to people, it's really important to date with intention and to be in a really good place. When you are feeling confident about yourself, you feel worthy and deserving of love, real, true love, and you've created a life that other people might want to be a part of, then you are able to date with intention. And that's really important versus dating out of need or void. If you're looking outside to fill the voids, then you might be missing the mark and lose in ways that maybe don't serve you very well.
It's like dating with distraction or boredom.
Right.
Versus intention. And that kind of goes to that second piece of advice that you gave, which was evaluating this person. And I recently made that error I've been enjoying in some ways dating during the pandemic, because what used to be sort of strange as a first step, which would be a video call or even a phone call, is now common practice. And it's wonderful for exactly what you've just said, really getting a deeper sense of who this person is and what they're up to. But I have absolutely made that mistake where I don't really evaluate people. So can you talk a little bit more? What does that look like, that evaluation process? And I know you told me that you have never been on a bad first date. So I know that you are highly skilled at this.
Absolutely. Yes. And when I say I've never been on a bad first date, I always follow up with, I'm no better than anybody else. It's that I know how to present myself. I've done my work, and I know how to assess people really well up front, so that by the time I would get to a first date, I knew two things. And these are the two factors that people really want to think about. Is this person a good quality person? And that means quality across the board. It doesn't mean perfect, because none of us is perfect, but quality means good quality across the board. And so, for example, somebody who is, say successful professionally and financially and is a jerk is not a good quality person, because the success doesn't compensate for the jerkiness. Okay.
Wise words.
So quality is the first factor, and a potential good fit is the second. And that has to do with shared interests, shared values. Shared values are foundational in a healthy relationship. And so it's really important to give thought to what your own core values are, to share that in a profile, and to be looking for that through somebody else's profile and in the communication. Do they share values with you? That really sets people up for more success in the process as well. So quality and fit are two of the things that are really, really important. And to your point about the pandemic, I actually think the pandemic is good for dating and setting people up for more success, because it really has forced people to slow the process down and to get back to what we might even call some old-fashioned courtship rituals that just simply involve talking and getting to know each other on a deeper level before moving forward. And I think people do tend to kind of rush the process, and that's another factor that can actually sabotage them along the way. So for me, out of my own experience, I'm in a relationship now, but when I was dating, I would really make sure that I was in a good place before I would get out there. One of the things I also encourage people to pay attention to is their mindset, which is about how we think about ourselves, about other people we might go out with, about dating, the online dating world, all of that, and really doing some work around that to, again, ensure that your mindset is positive about this whole process. And then looking for people who are good quality and a good fit, so that by the time I would get to a first date, I knew those two things. I knew that I was going out with a nice person, and that I was going to have a nice time, even if it didn't continue onto a second date. And so I wouldn't feel like it was a waste of time. And I also believe that whether things work out or not, there's learning in each experience for us. There are lessons for us. And so every experience is, if you're open to it, is going to also give you more information about yourself and what you want and need in a relationship.
I mean, and that's the perfect mindset right there, is coming to it, I'm just getting information about this person. It's just a learning experience. It's not like the end all be all, because I think what you were saying about us rushing the process, it's so interesting when you were bringing that up. I thought of two things. One is, it's kind of vulnerable these days to take things slow, to really put out there exactly what you're looking for, and to spell it out and to be very clear. I think that people, I mean, I'm, dating in like the 30-something bracket, but people in a way, they try and minimize what they're looking for, or they might not be totally transparent. I think because they want to be flexible or open, but what you're saying is that's actually doing them a disservice.
Right. Absolutely. One of the things that I talk a lot about is that everything is information. You know, the picture somebody puts up, what they say, what they don't say, how they communicate, it's all information. And the more we can be clear about who we are and what we want, and then look for that in the profiles that, you know, what resonates most for us, the more likely we are to be able to find people that are a potentially good fit for us. And it does require some vulnerability. Absolutely. You know, it's dealing with our hearts and our emotions, and that of course can be a very vulnerable place for us. At the same time, the beginning of the process, it's not that personal, actually, even though it feels very personal. When people are online, everybody's trying to connect with people, and usually with multiple people. And that can feel uncomfortable sometimes, but you know, if somebody doesn't respond, it feels hurtful and it's not that personal. And if you can remember that, it can help you to just keep moving forward and not get stuck or hung up on the ones that aren't resonating for you for whatever reason. I'll say, you know, why would you want to be with somebody who doesn't recognize how spectacular you are? So if somebody's not responding, they're not seeing, for whatever reason, how spectacular you are, move on. They're not the right person for you.
I love that. That's something that I think I've taken to heart more and more over the years. I've started to say, if something doesn't work out, somebody who I thought was great, you know, just from the first meeting, I don't know them very much, they disappear, they fall off the wavelength, whatever happens, I'm now saying, okay, like the universe just cleared the path a little bit more for me. They just said, for whatever reason, this was not a great fit. We're going to remove this from your journey and continue on. Because I used to get really hung up sometimes on those situations and circumstances. And what I love about what you're bringing here is it's so pragmatic and so practical and so grounded, which I think leads to that other reason that came to mind about why people rush things, or why I've rushed things in the past, is that, you know, really letting my emotions, or like excitement, which at that level, let's be honest, they're mostly projections, because I can't possibly know this person.
Absolutely.
And I let them take over.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's so understandable, right? Because we get swept up in it, you know, and it can feel really good. And, you know, if you connect really well with somebody early on, that's fabulous. And what you just said is so important. You can't really know them right away. You can feel like you do. And if you have that feeling, that's awesome. And it's really important to remember that it takes time to get to know somebody. And it's really behavior over time that tells us who somebody is. People can say all kinds of things. And most of us, let's be honest, are on our best behavior when we first start dating. Ideally, we're not showing all of ourselves right out of the gate, because it takes time to develop trust and so forth. It can also be uncomfortable for people to be in those early stages and allowing yourself to feel that vulnerability as you're getting to know each other. It can feel easier to kind of jump in quickly with seeing each other all the time and having sex and meeting family and going out under normal circumstances and doing all kinds of things. You can start to feel this kind of intimacy that isn't fully true yet, because it can't be. So I often and really encourage people to just really take that time to get to know somebody and not rush the process. And it will set you up for more success and also allow you to have more fun ultimately too, actually.
Yeah. When you were speaking to, I mean, something that I've thought about recently, because we're in the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, people were predominantly using dating apps to meet new people. I mean, you could still meet somebody out and about or through friends, but, you know, dating apps has taken over this huge real estate in the dating world. And if you think about, you were mentioning courtship or even just dating historically, it maybe, you know, you might meet somebody, but it wasn't instantly under this umbrella of romantic interest. Whereas when you meet somebody on a dating app, even if ultimately there's just friendship there and there's nothing more, it's starting off with the energy of, is there romance here? Which I think can also really, I don't know, make us jump headlong into something or it just sets a different precedent for how we're relating to start with somebody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you're on a dating app, you're there, unless you're doing like Bumble Biz or Bumble Friends or something like that. If you're on a dating app, most people are on there to find romance, to find some kind of relationship, whatever the nature of that might be. So it sets up a certain expectation for sure. And so, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, finding that balance, that sweet spot of being engaged and open, and at the same time being objective and pragmatic. It's a balance that can be really hard for people, especially when emotions are strong. And the more that you can find that balance, the more you're going to be able to set yourself up for success in the process.
It's an art. Like what you're saying, I teach meditation. I'm like, that's meditation. Like that's what we do when we meditate. We learn how to balance our mind, which is an amazing tool. It's powerful. Sometimes we let it run the show too much with, our creativity and listening to our intuition, listening to the universe, listening to divine, however you want to conceive of it. And we're, sort of balancing both pieces and even more, right? So in some ways it's almost like a living meditation
right.
for people, or a living yoga. Maybe yoga is a better word. That dating, it's really just an opportunity to see ourselves, like you mentioned in the beginning. It's just, where are we at? And now we're looking through the lens of relationships, but not an easy task.
No, and it's so interesting. I mean, I work with, people of all different ages and genders and situations and circumstances. And one of the things that I'm so aware of is I tend to work with more women, because women tend to seek out help more. And I work with some incredibly spectacular women, who are super successful in all different parts of their lives, except relationships. And it's fascinating, that these women are, CEOs, and they're confident and powerful, and they feel empowered in all different areas. And when it comes to relationships, it just triggers all this stuff for people that's so vulnerable. And so, the more you can, again, kind of do your work around that in advance, or at least work with somebody while you're in process, so that you can learn what you need to learn as you're going along. And identify those patterns, and also really learn how to be selective and flexible at the same time. Again, I want people to choose quality for sure, and not give people a pass because, they have one thing, but not another. That's really important. But being flexible is also really important, because we all have ideas of kind of who our type is, or, what kind of person we're supposed to be with. And sometimes people show up in really unexpected ways. And when we are open to possibility, which I'm really big on, then amazing things can happen also. And that also is a way to bring more fun back into the process too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so interesting what you're talking about. Can you say more? I'm just curious about these women specifically that you work with, because I do think it's when you were talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, I know, I've seen that a lot. That's something that's actually pretty common. Like, what are their unique struggles that they're dealing with? Or you mentioned that it's triggering a lot of things within them. Are those unique for each individual, or are they kind of like generalized things, if somebody were to identify with that?
Yeah, I think they're more unique for the most part. What I would say, though, that might be more universal, has to do with self-esteem when it comes to relationships. That even though, again, these women in particular we're talking about are, very successful and powerful in business, or, in other areas, there's this insecurity that they often share when it comes to relationships. And that insecurity ends up kind of driving the choices that they make, which then reinforces the insecurity, right? They get stuck. It becomes that vicious cycle. So, how they got to that place, I think varies, of course, from person to person. But I think that the common denominator is insecurity, and what comes with insecurity, I think, is choices that they accept less than what they really want and deserve.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about that too, I'm like, well, if the framework for you dating is insecurity, I mean, not consciously, right? It's coming in through the cracks, through any places where you just really don't feel, at peace with yourself. Of course, that's not going to be fun.
Right.
Of course, that's not an enjoyable process, because, even then, if you meet somebody that you're interested in and you're excited about, if there's insecurity there, it's almost maybe more of an opportunity for those insecurities to take center stage.
Right. And drive the process. Right. Absolutely. The other thing that goes along with that, again, working on how you see yourself, of course, matters. That's what we're talking about. The mindset piece is also so important. When I have a dating webinar that I teach, it's 2 hours long. Sometimes we go longer. People at the start are like 2 hours, but it goes by really fast. And
when you talk about dating, you can talk forever. That's what I've discovered.
And I'm so passionate about it. So it's one of my favorite things to talk about. But one of the things that, I just lost my train of thought.
On your webinar.
Yeah. So one of the things that the feedback that I get from people is that they often will leave feeling more optimistic and inspired, which is part of my mission in teaching those webinars. And a lot of it really has to do with that mindset piece. People come into the webinars, those who have had experience, it's mostly negative. When I ask people, to share like what's their experience been, call out words, most of the words are pretty negative. And I'm on a mission to change that. And part of it has to do with changing your mindset and also feeling more confident about yourself, but also in your ability to navigate this process. And there are very specific ways to do that. There's a certain kind of profile, length and content that is going to attract more of the kinds of people that you're wanting to attract. There's a way to assess profiles. There's a way to use the messaging to gather more information that helps you assess people better before you take those next steps. And so having confidence in your ability to navigate it also can make a huge difference as well.
It makes so much sense what you're saying, because, your mindset is coloring the way that you're communicating, the way that you're building your profile. I mean, I know there's times I felt really jaded or burned by somebody. I don't know how much this comes into your world, but I've met quite a few people who are in non-monogamous or open relationships. And I'm like, that's all great and wonderful. I really don't, that's not what I want. And so for a little bit, I actually put up on my profile, like, I'm not into this. But then after some time, I revisited it and I realized, this is a lot of like no energy that I'm putting out. Right. And yes, I did meet a whole bunch of people who were like that, but that's not the world. That's not, I can maybe, to your point, ask better questions or do a little bit more due diligence after we've matched versus have this kind of like chainmail fence up. And I think one thing that really triggered my understanding of that was seeing somebody else's profile, a man who had just like a whole bunch of no's listed out. And I was like, you seem cute and attractive, but it's like all you have are these no's. And I get that you have standards. I'm happy you have standards and self-respect, but there was something about it that did feel, just really negative. And to your point about that mindset, it's like, he's kind of bringing his full chainmail armor
right
to the first date, to before the first date. We haven't even said hi. It's like, can you put the sword down for the moment and we'll just make some friendly chit chat and see, if there's something here.
Absolutely. When I see the negative stuff in a profile, like no drama, no this, no that, it
no drama.
Yeah, right. So when I see
red flag,
whatever comes after the no tells me that this person just had that experience. It reveals actually a lot about them, and it is such a turn off, right? And I always encourage people not to have any negativity in a profile, because there are ways to reframe it in a positive way. So saying, you know, I'm not looking for hookups, for example, or for an open relationship or whatever, you can instead say, you know, I'm looking for the real deal, right? It conveys the same information. Clearly, if you're looking for the real deal, you're not looking for hookups, right? You're looking for a real relationship. So finding ways to frame things in a positive way still gets your message across, and it's going to be, you know, it's just much more attractive.
And going back to fun, it's more fun.
Right.
That's more engaging, and there's more joy and lightheartedness versus no.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, again, the no, you know, people say no baggage. All right. Well, you know, nobody gets to adulthood without some baggage, you know, it's just how much of it you have and how much you've done on it.
Right.
You know, but these people, you know, some people say like, I have no baggage. Really? You're 50 and you have none whatsoever, not even a carry-on?
Yeah. You're like, well, maybe you got a whole closet that's like, everything's buried underneath the bed. So
from Shakespeare, I think he doth protest too much.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting when I read specifically no drama or anything that's like about just charged, feels really charged. I'm like, I sort of now think that you are dramatic.
Right.
I'm actually pretty confident that you probably bring some drama to the table. And that's why you feel the need to say nobody else needs to be dramatic, but it sort of backfires.
Right. Absolutely. And I can't recall now, if we talked earlier about this or during the interview, but you know, one of the things that's really important to remember is that everything is information. Everything, what they say, what they don't say, how they say it, how they communicate. And really your job, if you're dating, is to kind of be like a researcher, kind of gather all that information or data and look at what it's telling you. Does it resonate for you? Is it positive? Do you share values? Are you looking for the same kind of thing? It is all information.
Yeah.
Everything.
And what you had said too earlier really stood out to me. It's about what they do also, because I think that is something that I've struggled with. Many people have struggled with. We get excited. We want that package that they're presenting themselves as, but then, you know, maybe they don't follow up. They're not very timely. They don't have consistent communication, whatever that sort of, those different ways that they're not actually really showing up for you, we can sort of overlook or excuse or not pay attention to until, you know, eventually we're like frustrated and it's just not working out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We can get easily blinded by the shiny objects. It's like when you know, go shop in a store and they have all those tiny little things, you know, in the mile long line leading up to the register, right? Because they want you to like pick all those little shiny things up before you actually get to the register. We get distracted and we lose sight of the big picture. So it is really important to pay attention to all of it and to also remember that I believe that people really show a lot of who they are very early on. And if we're willing to really look at all of it, we can see what people are telling us. They show us through their behavior. You know, when people aren't consistent, for example, with their communication, that's information. That's really important information. If you feel like you're working harder than they are in keeping the conversation going, that's information for you, you know, and if you're doing that at this stage, you know, what's going to happen down the road?
Absolutely. It can be hard. We don't, you know, we want to get to the register sometimes, right? We can have that. Maybe that's the race to the checkout line and skipping by all those important pieces of real intimacy that you were mentioning. And also fun, like you said, because it's when we put that much pressure, sort of full tilt, pedal to the metal, right? Maybe we both really want a relationship. We both really want X, Y, Z. So we sort of ignore what's actually happening,
right? To
to race down to whatever it is we desire. yeah, it's interesting. It can cause us to lose the fun and lose the joy. We're not really present with the relationship at that point. We're kind of creating some storyline.
Right. Well, and one thing I think that can really help with that is kind of bringing it back to like a step-by-step process, like really at its core, like you look at a photo and you decide, usually within a few seconds, whether or not you like the photo enough to want to look at the rest of their profile. Then you read their profile. Do you like their profile enough? What's in it to want to reach out to them? When they respond, do you like their response enough to want to continue to communicate? Do you then like that enough to want to have a call, a video date, a meet in person? And when you go on a first date, I will say to my clients, the only question at the end of a first date is whether or not you might want a second date, and ditto for the second and the third dates. And when you are able to kind of keep it in that step-by-step process, it keeps you from getting too far ahead of yourself in your own head. If you go into every first date thinking, is this my person? Is this my soulmate? Is this the one I'm going to marry? And, how would they get along with my friends and my family? And if you bring all that into it really early on, that is way too much pressure. And it's going to sabotage it. It's just too much pressure. So if you can keep it in that step-by-step process, again, you can feel like soulmates and, feel really good about the connection and how it's building. But it really, really helps to just break it down and not get too far ahead in your own head about where things might go.
Yeah, so grounded, such a practical take on dating that I think we need at this day and age, because it has sort of become this Wild West of, I don't know what, gunslinging.
Yeah.
Like, do not pass go. Everybody's just.
Well, and it's also a way to have fun, right? Like if you're not worrying about what's going to happen in a year or 10 years, like again, if you can just be more present, then you can also have more fun too, while you're still being pragmatic and assessing, quality and fit and what information they're giving you. It's when we get too far ahead of ourselves that we trip ourselves up, actually.
Right. Well, I think if people start to follow your dating advice and join your webinar, they will not only have more successful dating lives, but they will also become enlightened beings.
Right.
Because like exactly what you're talking about, this unattachment, not detachment, where we're avoidant and not grasping, but that, just really centered and balanced unattachment where we can let things come and let things go and just be the observer. I mean, that is like the crux of becoming a master of your own energy structure, your own mind and your own emotions, which, I wouldn't say it's the end goal, but it's an amazing thing to achieve. And something obviously which we achieve piece by piece over time. So a huge benefit, not just to your dating life, but for your life.
Absolutely.
In general.
Absolutely. And I talked about earlier, feeling good about yourself and creating a life, that other people might want to be a part of. And to that point also, I think that when you have done that, like when you have a full life that you feel good about, then that frees you up to be more selective also. When I was dating, what I would say to myself is that, my life is good and I'm comfortable on my own. And I'm really looking for somebody spectacular. That was my word, spectacular, who's going to come in and enhance my life. And that's really different from just filling voids. I want someone who's going to enhance my life. And I'd rather be alone than be with the wrong person. And I was really, really clear about that. Because being with the wrong person can feel pretty awful. And you can feel far lonelier in a relationship that's not right sometimes than if you were just by yourself. So when you can get to that place, then it really does free you up to date more intentionally and more selectively as well.
Right. And not to rush, because it's like, well, where are you rushing to? If you enjoy your life, you feel fulfilled, you feel content, there's no need to run towards that finish line, because obviously having that relationship, like you said, there's going to be enhancement, but there's no difference between then and now. It's just, I'm enjoying, I'm content, I'm at peace with things as they are, as they stand.
Right. Absolutely.
That's awesome. So I think we have time for one more. And I'm asking this because, so I'm a healer, I'm a spiritual guide, and I'm dating. And I just find it so interesting to see how people respond to that. I'm not a dating coach, so I'm not necessarily triggering that in the other people that I'm interacting with, but there is a certain way that I bring, this identity with me, and it's creating a response. Mm-hmm. And maybe also within me too, I think I've put it down more and more, but a way that I feel like I need to be an expert, and how that can sometimes come in between myself and just meeting another person. So I'm curious for you, I know that you're not dating currently, but when you were dating, how did being a dating coach affect at all, if it did at all, dating?
Sure. Yeah. So it's such a great question. So just a little tiny bit of backstory. So I started my career in clinical psychology, and I was a therapist for over 20 years and then became a coach. So my whole career, has been in this, kind of genre of helping people. And so a couple things, one is when I would tell people that I was a therapist before, or a dating coach now, specifically a relationship coach, how people respond to that was information for me. Like I knew that I wanted somebody who was really self-reflective and liked to process and was open and so forth, and open with their emotions. And so if people would respond to, what do you do? And I would tell them with, they get all kind of threatened, or want to know if I'm going to read their mind, or put more pressure on me in some way. I knew that those weren't going to be a good fit. Those people would not be a good fit for me. The people who were curious about what I did and wanted to know more, those were the people I was drawn to, because it said something about them and their openness to the kind of work that I do. And the other piece, just in terms of kind of what you said, what you bring to it, given the work that you do, I certainly have at times also felt that pressure, like here I am, this expert, I should be doing it perfectly, right? And what I would tell myself, and what I say to people, is I'm human first. I'm a full human being before I became a therapist and then a coach. And so as a human being, I've had all kinds of experiences, and I have all different emotions and different thoughts that I bring to the process first. Fortunately, I also have this expertise that can help guide me in my own experience. But, my humanness, I lead with my humanness in this process, and always did, not with my dating coach hat when I was engaged in the process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. I can feel when I put it on. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm stepping into it, or, maybe I feel that they expect me to do that or something. And I felt that to be a hindrance because you really just want to connect with people.
Right.
And obviously be seen for your humanness and seen for your vulnerabilities. I mean, as scary as we've talked about that can be to share that, that's also what's attractive oftentimes in another person, or about yourself too. So I could totally understand that. And I love what you said too. It's just information, because at the end of the day,
right,
of course, we can make it mean so many other things.
Sure.
Oh, what does that mean about me and this and that? But it's like, no, it's really just facts and figures to a certain extent, especially when you're just meeting somebody.
Right. Well, and the work that we do is just one part of who we are, right? And so I would say, like, if you're feeling pulled to put that hat on, that's information for you that, there's something going on there. And maybe, in a way that doesn't actually serve what you're trying to find, if you're putting that hat on right out of the gate,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I saw it for myself, just to share a little bit, there were times that I would do it because that was a dynamic that was being created. Like that we were not going to date. Yeah. This person and we were not a match. We could continue to have a conversation, but there was a way that things shifted. And so that was kind of okay.
Yeah.
But then there were other times where I would put it on and it became, sort of I would say a fear of intimacy, or maybe that a vulnerability that I might have been afraid for whatever reason to expose, that was sort of like a default crutch that I would use. But yeah, I guess it's a little, it's interesting because I meet people everywhere and I meet clients everywhere. And I don't go on dating sites to meet clients, but I have absolutely met people through dating sites, just because, as you said, it's a way to find people that are mirroring certain things. So you're bringing a certain energy to the table and you're going to meet like-minded folks. So it might have made me more trigger happy, I guess, with the expert hat. But I just think it's funny because there's this, you said it perfectly, kind of this duality that we inhabit, which is I have some knowledge, I have some extra skill, and I'm also a human with baggage and issues and stories and things that I'm working on. And that will not stop until really the day that I die, and potentially after that. So it's, it's allowing ourselves to be a whole person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Allowing ourselves to be a whole person first and foremost, and then making sure that we're selecting people who are going to support that as well. Yeah. Right.
What you said from the very beginning about somebody not being able to see just how amazing and wonderful we are, or the person is, whoever is dating. It's so true, because I like to think of it for myself, for others, like I'm a gem. I'm a diamond in the rough. I'm a prize. I'm like this amazing thing. Obviously I have issues. I'm not perfect. We're not going to go down that route right now, but that aside, I'm still this amazing being, and I have so much to give and to share. And if for whatever reason that's not being honored or seen or noticed, and I've actually even seen this in work relationships too. It's like, well, if the strengths that I have and I bring to the table aren't the strengths that are desired, honored, valued, for whatever reason, it's not a good fit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it needs to feel like a good fit for both of you in order for it to truly be a good fit. It's not enough that you might feel it. They have to feel it too. And I think that's important, because sometimes people, can connect with somebody and kind of idealize them and think that they are a perfect person for them. And the other person isn't responding in that way. And they think that they can kind of change how they feel, how the other person feels, and they work really hard to that end. And I think it's really important to remember that, we need to honor and value ourselves first and foremost. And we need to pay attention to how people respond, and to recognize that we can't change other people. We can only change how we respond to them. And that's actually where our power is also. But it needs to be a good fit for both of you for it to be a genuinely good fit.
Yeah. When you were saying that, I was thinking of, how would you change somebody's mind? And you could literally get them to try to change their mind. But the way that I've seen it for myself and others is you change the way that you present. It's like, then it's all of a sudden, how can I modify myself to fit somebody else, versus no, I'm me.
Exactly.
I'm me first and foremost. How can I meet somebody that aligns with that?
Right.
Rather than trying to shape shift. And I think that's where, like people pleasing can come into play, or just not really knowing yourself well enough to know where your boundaries are, what you do like, what you don't like, where your values are. And then you're sort of just this, like, you take the shape of whatever you're around.
Right.
And, both parties can feel very unfulfilled by that sort of relationship.
Authentic. So, right. It lends itself to not feeling good ultimately.
Right.
Yeah.
So good. So many words of wisdom. I know that you regularly host your webinar. I'm sure many people will want to attend that and learn more.
Yes, so I teach my webinar several times a year in all different places, and where people can find out about it is by following my Facebook business page. That's usually where the easiest way to find them. It's where I post them, and that's just at Susan Trotter, PhD. So people can go there and follow me and hopefully show up at some of my webinars. And there's value in coming back to more than one, because I do give out so much information. It's a lot and it's hard to kind of remember everything and take it all in. So I encourage people to come back over and over again.
We need reminders too. You know, we can forget everything you're saying. It's so practical, so structured. At the core, it's so simple, but then our emotions come in, our fears, our anxieties, our worries, you know, it's stirring up these deep things within us and we forget. We throw the handbook right out the window. So I can imagine that coming back is hugely valuable for folks. Absolutely. And you can find all that information there. It's also below the video so people can find you and connect with you as well.
Absolutely. And I also offer to people, I'm happy to do a complimentary consultation with anybody that might be interested. In addition to dating, I also help people who are in relationships and want to strengthen the connection and improve communication. And to that end, I work with individuals and couples as well. And I also help people who are thinking about or going through divorce and help them navigate that process too. So I'm happy to do a consultation. And for anybody who has an online dating profile and would like me to do a quick review and give them some feedback, they can also send that to me via email, which is susantrotterphd@gmail.com. We'll put that in the comments later. And I'm happy to give you some feedback on your profile.
So fun. You can do a little audit on people's, okay, there's no drama. We're going to delete that.
Yes, delete that and
reframe.
Way to reframe it.
Absolutely. So great. Well, it's so lovely to have you. Thank you so much, Susan, for taking this time and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us.
Oh, thank you, Julie. This was such a blast. I feel like we could talk for hours about all of this.
And we could. I do. I specifically love it. We focused on dating, which is, you know, my little area that I'm obsessed with. But you were speaking now about divorce and relation. It's like we could go on and on and on. There's so much there.
Well, it was such a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me to join you. And I look forward to connecting more with you as well.
That's good. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.
Okay, let me